welcome back to the Jet Press Podcast. My name is Justin Fried, and I am joined, as always, by my good friend, Mike Luciano. Mike, I got to be honest, before we jump in and even start, I said this to you right before this is the most excited I've been to talk about the Jets in weeks. Yesterday was a wild news day for this organization, and I had entered the apathetic stage where I didn't really care about anything going on, but yesterday made me feel for the first time about this team in a long time. They weren't good feelings. It was almost like Jets depression, where I just wasn't feeling anything. And now I'm just happy to feel something, even if that feeling is humiliation, anger, whatever it is. But I feel something, Mike. So how are you feeling today, buddy? What's going on?
Here's the problem I have with what we're going to talk about today. This is a football podcast meant to talk about football, you know? And I've always kind of, mocked people that are into that too celebrity culture where it's all about, who's talking to who, who's dating who, what are they wearing, all that stuff. Justin, how are we any better right now? Because we're supposed to be talking about a Super Bowl run. All we're talking about is interpersonal drama and who's scheming with who and who's all the power plays. But I feel like we might as well be talking about like the Kardashians in terms of the dynamics that we're discussing. But nope, it's the New York Jets.
Yeah.
So because of that, we got a firing because Joe Douglas is no longer the GM of the New York Jets. And then we got an incredible amount of info that was leaked, assuredly from Douglas himself afterwards, that basically said the Jets, if you thought they were bad, they're somehow even worse than you thought. Like, the Jets have always been like dysfunctional in a way that isn't that loud. I can't remember a time when the Jets have been dysfunctional this loudly. Like in a James Dolan, David Tepper, the Texans for a while kind of way, where it's just out and out and the owner is taking control. I mean, this is uncharted territory.
I think Tebow era might have been that. They were pretty loud.
But even again, those teams were. I don't even think so. I don't even think so.
The latter Rex years, that was pretty loud. Those were pretty loud years. But I get what you're saying.
So before that, you could find us on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Overcast, wherever you get your podcasts, we are there. And there's two ways you can support the show on YouTube. Subscribing is one. Just hit that little subscribe button and boom, you've subscribed. Or you could be like AJ, who's one of our members, and for 99 cents a month, you could join our membership and get top priority reply in the comments whenever we do our podcast or live streams. Those are the two ways, one free, one 99 cents a month, to support the show and help us make more content. We are not skimping for content. We thought we might be at this point in the year because, who cares what happens? And it's the bye week. We are not skimping anymore because Joe Douglas is no longer the GM. A move that was expected because Douglas was out of a contract at the end of this year. Widely expected it was not going to be retained, and he already started looking for real estate in the Maryland area. Douglas had worked for Baltimore for years beforehand. Douglas's legacy, to sum it up in a word, it's complicated. Because if you look at the past two GMs before him, John Idzik and Mike McCann, I would very strongly postulate that Joe Douglas is a better GM than both of them. And a guy who looked like he had it all figured out comes from two winning organizations, Baltimore, Philadelphia. And if you were to just take all his moves and just go point by point, good move, bad move, neutral move, I bet he probably has more good moves than bad moves, especially if you weight it. With that first round, that 2022 draft, you got to hand it to him. And I don't want to hear, it's Sauce at number 4, that's easy. Is Evan Neal easy? Is Trey Lance easy? Is Zach Wilson easy? You could easily screw up picks that high. And he nailed 4 of them in a row in that draft. I like some of the free agent acquisitions he's had. John Simpson, DJ Reed. He's made some good moves there. He traded before we knew what was going to happen with the Achilles. He pulled off the Aaron Rodgers trade, Devontae Adams, moves that your GM should make. And he got good players in there. I don't think anybody says the Jets don't have a talented roster. And at the end of the day, that's the main job of GM, is to get good players in. But any way you can. Free agency, the draft, he got good players in. But he ran out of road because there were two fatal flaws that contributed to a 30-64 record that Joe Douglas had. No winning seasons, never won more than 7 games. He had two main flaws. Number one, before this year, he didn't get an offensive line. It took him 6 years to get an offensive line. Never got quarterback. Never got quarterback. You could say he botched the Saleh hiring, but probably that's Woody. He never got a quarterback. He thought it was Zach Wilson. Horrible miss. The kind of miss that most GMs don't get years after to improve upon. That's how bad the Wilson pick was. And then obviously Aaron Rodgers, we know what's been going on this year. That's a miss. Here's the one get-out-of-jail-free card that Joe Douglas has. And your answer, if you answer in the affirmative to this, I think that you can cut Douglas a lot of slack here. Was it solely Joe Douglas's decision to pursue the Aaron Rodgers trade? Because if it wasn't, and it was a lot of Woody influence, which as we've seen from the leagues, he has more than most owners have influence, then I feel bad for him in kind of the same way I felt bad for Saleh, where they both weren't getting it done. You know, Robert Saleh was 20 and 36 as a coach, Joe Douglas 30 and 64 as a GM. But my God, there was so much stuff going on there that they had no say in, and it directly impacted them. It's a tough one because I don't think he's bad at picking players. He picked a lot of good players with the Jets. He just couldn't make them all the jigsaw pieces fit together.
I think that the process, and we hear this a lot, but I think that the process was often right with Joe Douglas with a lot of moves. And this is not going to be meant to make him a martyr. This isn't meant to say that he should not have been fired, because ultimately, when you are 30 and 64 as a general manager and you've been given 6 years to field a competitive roster, and the best roster, the best winning percentage that you've had as GM is with the roster that you inherited, with a roster that you called, I believe, a practice squad roster and what was it, an expansion team roster. Those were exact words that were used by the Jets to describe that roster that Joe Douglas took over. And now look at where we are in 2024, and they still haven't had a better record than that first year under Joe Douglas and under Adam Gase. So I think the process has often been right with him. You know, I've agreed with a lot of his roster building strategies. The results haven't been there. The results have never been there. And like you said, Mike, he missed on a lot of the biggest things. He missed on quarterback. He drafted Zach Wilson. That was an utter failure and is going to go down as one of the biggest busts in draft history, most likely. And then he pursued Aaron Rodgers. Again, how much of that was himself and how much of that was outside influence, we'll never know, probably. I'm sure Woody Johnson had some say in that, but I also don't think this is a situation where Joe Douglas was opposed to pursuing Aaron Rodgers, especially because, as we'll get into later with that, I think if he was opposed to pursuing Aaron Rodgers, that would have been detailed in great detail. That would have been described in great detail in that report. So I don't think this is a situation where Woody Johnson overruled Joe Douglas with that. There's other situations where he overruled him. But ultimately, even before Woody Johnson really started having a heavy hand and a significant say in the day-to-day operations of the Jets, Joe Douglas was given roughly 4 years without much outside interference that we know of to field a competitive team. And in those years, he did not do that. In fact, his draft record over those years was abysmal. Outside of 2022, his drafts were really, really bad. I mean, from Zach Wilson to Mekhi Becton to Denzel Mims to Jabari Zuniga, there were so many whiffs. The Jets have had more top 45 or top 50 picks than all but like 3 teams in the NFL since Joe Douglas has been here. And while I think the roster is obviously in a much better place than when he first came into New York, the results aren't there. They're not winning football games. And at the end of the day, this is a results-based business. You need to win. You need to win to keep your job in the NFL. We all knew Joe Douglas was going to be gone at the end of the year. I think there was some saving grace, or at least thought to be saving grace, when Robert Saleh was fired, when Woody Johnson went and told the media this is the most talented Jets team he's ever seen. One of the most talented teams in the franchise's history. That seemed to be a ringing endorsement of Joe Douglas. In reality, as it seems, it was more of an endorsement of himself. At least that's what the Athletic report tried to make it seem. That was Woody Johnson kind of patting himself on the back and saying, look what I've done to build this roster. I brought in Aaron Rodgers, and I brought in Hassan Reddick, and I've now making a move to bring in Devontae Adams, which clearly that was a Woody Johnson move. We'll get more into the details of that report, because I don't think that report necessarily makes Joe Douglas smart regardless. But as it stands, Joe Douglas, I agree with you, Mike. I think he was a better general manager than Mike McCagnon and John Idzik to his record. Ultimately, he's better than his 30 and 64 record indicates, but the bar is extremely low when your record is that bad. And the totality of what he did led to him being deserved to be fired.
AJ in the comments, the JD fire reminds me a lot of Saleh's. Can't argue against it, but unlike Saleh's, the timing seems somewhat premature. This feels prudent and will help us get a better jump on 2025. That's been said as much, where they did it now just so that way they get 2 months of, interviewing candidates, looking at candidates, researching, try to get the best guy. And if you know you're not going to bring him back, and there's no moves they can make now for him to like salvage it, and the trade deadline's over. Like there's nothing he can do talent acquisition wise to change anybody's mind. So might as well rip the Band-Aid off now.
You know what the cynic in me thinks, though, Mike? I think while that's probably partially the reason that they did this, because they wanted to get a head start and searching for GMs. In reality, they could have done that with Douglas there. It was just been pretty awkward. And it's essential. Joe Douglas, like we've been saying for weeks in the show, has not been working since Robert Saleh was fired. That was when Joe Douglas stopped working. He's basically been at home just coasting for weeks now. The cynical part of me thinks that while that might be part of the reason that they did this, I also think Woody Johnson wanted to make a statement, and he kind of wanted to make it be like, oh, well, we're firing him. We're not letting him part ways on amicable terms. No. This is a firing. He did not live up to expectations. He did not do his job, and he's going out on my terms. I'm making that decision. The cynical part of me thinks that played a factor here.
And there's the peak delusion of Woody, too, because if you asked Woody Johnson, I think he would honestly probably, he says, this is my team.
Yeah.
And he would probably admit that he had, if you gave him a truth serum, he'd admit he had influence in a lot of these things.
Oh, of course. He knows
so
that.
He's doing, honestly, because he's such a mirror of this fan base sometimes, he's doing what a lot of fans would do. Remember when Saleh would, when he would lose a game, and every time the defense was good, it was Jeff Ulbrich, and whenever it was bad, it was Saleh. He's doing this thing now, which all, egotistical rich assholes do at some point, where everything good that happens to me is because of me, and everything bad that happens is because of somebody else. Because I'm me and I'm awesome, so I can't possibly mess something up. And yeah, he's right in that Joe Douglas did not do what was expected of him. He was expected to get the Jets to the playoffs, and he had 2 years where he had Super Bowl expectations. Now, Rodgers screwed it up. Nobody could plan for that. Fine. He gets a mulligan. 3-8 with a Super Bowl. So I get where he's kind of coming from, but what makes this gray is you're not going to go and tally up every single move and go, this was a Joe Douglas move, this was a Woody Johnson move. It's hard to do that, and you're never going to really find an answer there. It's really hard to give a definitive answer on how good Joe Douglas was. Even people in the media who were so assured, it's really difficult. It really is like an eye of the beholder kind of thing. I've seen people in the media. This is driving me crazy, by the way. People in the media saying that the Jets are a dumpster fire. It's LOL. It's same old Jets. This team doesn't know what he's doing. Robert Saleh sucks. Joe Douglas hasn't built a winner in 6 years. Then Saleh gets fired. Defensive genius. What are they doing? Aaron Rodgers is, running the organization himself. Joe Douglas gets fired. You've seen those tweets. He drafted all these good players. He drafted Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson. He's a drafting genius, I saw one guy tweet. And they fired him. Well, he's 30-64. If they kept him, you know what people would do? They'd laugh at him for keeping a guy who hadn't won in 6 years.
Rightfully
Adam
so.
Peters became the GM in Washington. They're 7-4 in his first year. Meanwhile, Joe Douglas can't get past the 7-win barrier in year 6. I get that it's fun to make fun of the Jets, and I get it's fun to dance on Aaron Rodgers' grave. But my God, you're overlooking logic here. You're overlooking a guy who has made some good moves, I'll give him. But he also has built a 30-64 team in a 6-year span.
Mm-hmm.
We may like the process. The results don't work out, but you know what? It's your job to make them work out. Process be damned.
There are certain media members, whether it's Colin Cowherd or whoever, who want you to believe that the Jets had a good quarterback in Zach Wilson, a good head coach in Robert Saleh, and a good GM in Joe Douglas, with the number one defense maybe in the entire NFL, and they only won 7 games. There are people that want you to believe that everything about the Jets was good, and yet they still couldn't win. I don't know, maybe because they're the Jets. I don't know what the reasoning would be.
Because of Aaron Rodgers? So, all right, so what? If they bench Aaron Rodgers for Tyrod Taylor, are they 8-3 right now?
Well, that's what a lot of people people have a vendetta against Aaron Rodgers. And you're going to find me on here defending Aaron Rodgers, some of the comments he's said in the past, or his personality, because he can be a bit abrasive, and we know all of that. But there's a lot of people who throw logic out the window when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, and everything just has to be his fault. It's so funny, too, because the same people that will criticize him, possibly rightfully so, for being a conspiracy theorist and all this stuff, will then make up their own conspiracy theories about Aaron Rodgers. It's like, oh, he's the reason that Saleh and Douglas got fired. He's run the show. It's GM Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers had nothing to do with Joe Douglas getting fired right now. Like, that is nothing
especially because everybody who has talked to Aaron Rodgers or knows people around Aaron Rodgers said if he wants to come back next year, which is still up in the air, I don't think he does, but I think right now it's probably 2/3 he doesn't, 1/3 he does. What he say nonstop was continuity was big. Yes. He doesn't want to learn a new playbook, learn new coaches, learn new teammates. Like, continuity was big. So if continuity was big for keeping Rodgers and the organization loved Rodgers, why would they fire the coach and GM? Because that goes against that. It's like the people who remember the Saleh shove thing.
Yes.
I'm going to call people up by name. Michael K., I remember, he's on the other end of the show. He goes, every person I've talked to said that was not, nobody cared. That was not even a thing. Like, it shouldn't even have been an issue.
Of course.
It was just a 5-second thing, not even a thing. He goes, I don't care. I still think something was up.
Oh, my God.
Like, that's where we're at right now. Where you know what it reminds me of, too? It reminds me of, God, this is my unfortunate sports fandom. Remember the team the Nets had before KD, Kyrie, or D'Angelo Russell, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, Kenny Atkinson as the coach? Everybody, they're building something special. Like, they brewed it. Would D'Angelo Russell, as the number one player, have done anything? No. Would the Jets, with Zach Wilson as their quarterback, Robert Saleh as their coach, Nathaniel Hackett or Mike LaFleur even as their offensive coordinator, the collection of receivers they had, even with that defense, would they have done anything? No.
Of course not.
So because of that, you have to shake it up. Now, Douglas's move backfired, but you got to give me a break with this, retroactive, everybody's great. The Jets are simultaneously a dumpster fire, and none of the decision makers are at fault. And yeah, I get that Woody is at fault primarily because he's the owner and this is his team, but like day-to-day football, outside of the rogue, like Tony Adams thing, like Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh still do oversee most of the actual football there. So you can't put that on Woody specifically. Woody wants to win, and Woody is trying to win. He's very desperate, and he doesn't know how to win, and he's trying everything to break the playoff curse, and he doesn't know any better, but he is making attempts. His attempts included trusting Saleh and Douglas.
Yeah, he's trying. He's an idiot. He's listening to idiots on the internet instead of football minds. He's listening to Peyton Manning telling him about it. Well, I guess that was more Christopher Johnson, but he's listening listening to Charlie Casserly and whoever else. But that's Woody. We know that's Woody. I want to talk about Rodgers really quick because you said that this means that, you think it's more like 2/3 chance he's gone, 1/3 chance he's back. I think this almost confirms he's not back next year. I would be shocked if Aaron Rodgers was on the Jets roster in 2025. And I'll make a prediction right now. I don't think Rodgers starts the rest of the year. I think Rodgers is benched at a certain point on IR, whatever they want to call it, because he's been banged up. He's very clearly playing hurt right now. He's dealing with the knee, the hamstring, the ankle, everything. I mean, the dude is banged up. And I don't see any reason why, especially if he still wants to play in 2025, which it sounds like right now that is the case. He does want to play football next year. I don't know what team's going to take him. I mean, I've seen the Titans floated out there. I've seen the Vikings floated out there as an option, which would be so.
Why? They have J.J. McCarthy.
Because they wouldn't know if McCart's ready to start yet, and they would want to bring in a veteran, as you would. Aaron Rodgers, of course, being the best veteran to mentor a young quarterback, as we've learned. But that would just be very funny because it followed the Brett Favre arc. But regardless, I think there's a very, 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 very slim chance that Aaron Rodgers is on the Jets roster in 2025. I don't know where they go at quarterback from there. The most likely or the most, I would say, appealing option is you run it back with Tyrod and you draft a rookie. But that hinges on where the Jets are drafting in the 2025 draft. Because if they finish with like the 10th pick, I'm not sure what quarterback you're going to be getting in an admittedly weak class.
You're not getting Ward. You're not getting Sanders. Probably might not even get Milroe at this rate.
Yeah, well, it's depend. I mean, obviously it's November. So much can change from now until April. But right now, I would not be comfortable with landing a quarterback that you want with the 10th overall pick. And you don't have an excess amount of draft capital to necessarily move up either. Thank you, Joe Douglas, for lighting multiple third-round picks on fire.
Hassan Reddick, Devontae, Malachi Corley.
Right, exactly. That's his parting gift, was lighting 3 third-round picks on fire in successive order. But yeah, so I think that is something where it's like, I don't think Rodgers is going to be here in 2025, but I'm not sure what they do with the quarterback position. Regardless, though, Douglas getting fired, especially now, and all the reports we're seeing now, I believe it's Connor Hughes has said this, Dan Rossini, Zach Rosenblatt, they're all like, yeah, it would be a stunner if Aaron Rodgers was on the roster in 2025. And we can't say for certain, we can't say 100% he won't be, because this is still Woody Johnson we're talking about. This is still the Jets. And Woody Johnson, before he, fucks off to London and goes to, drink tea with Donald Trump or whatever he's doing, he might change his mind again on a whim and say, hey, look, you know what? We're going to actually run it back one more year with Aaron Rodgers. We're bringing Rodgers back. I'm not sure Rodgers would want that. Another part of this equation. I don't know how much.
I think Rodgers, he likes money, and they may be the only team who wants him. So
possibly, yeah. So I don't know, but I still think right now, if I were to put odds on it, 97% chance Rodgers is not on the Jets roster in 2025. I'd be shocked.
I just think he has so much influence. Like, if he just wants to stay,
it doesn't sound like he does.
Have the stones to cut him.
It doesn't sound like he does, and I think that they would have the stones to cut him, because it sounds like Woody Johnson's done with it. It is done with the Rodgers era. Which I will say this, right? For as bad as the Jets might be right now, for as bad as it might seem for fans, I'm going to try and offer a little bit of solace right now, because this is the first time in how long, Mike, that the Jets are going into an offseason and they are completely resetting. And by completely resetting, I mean new head coach, new GM, new quarterback, all in one offseason.
New owner.
Yeah, new owner. Christopher Johnson's an extension of Woody Johnson's. I don't count that as much, but yeah, sort of a new owner.
I will say this though, especially if you talk to, like if you hear like what Connor Hughes has been saying a lot, personality-wise too, Woody and Chris are almost diametric opposites.
Oh, the players
like Chris. Chris is a lot more mild-mannered. In fact, Connor said the other day on WFAN in an interview, his problem was that he delegated too much. And Woody doesn't delegate anything.
Right.
Chris delegates too much.
I would rather
politically they're very different.
Yeah.
It's so you'd think that would be, the kind of change that the Jets need. Somebody who was just not only A, not Woody, and B, the diametric opposite of Woody outside of, his name and his family. But he was just as bad because he didn't know. Like Chris was big on, you're the general manager. I hired you to be the general manager. Go be the GM. That's why McCagnon lasted so long.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Bowles lasted as long as he did. That's why he even hired Gase. I trust these guys to do things the right way. The problem is he trusted the wrong guys. So I don't know which is worse. In a way.
Well, the one similarity that Woody and Christopher both have is they are both very impressionable people, and they listen to outside voices, which, look, neither of them is a genius football mind. So they should be listening to outside voices. Unfortunately, both of them have a track record of listening to the wrong voices, whether it's Woody Johnson listening to Charlie Cappy or listening to Drew from Jersey on Twitter or whatever.
Woody may even listen to right ideas, but the fact that he just has to demand things go in instantly, that's his problem.
Yeah,
even
and
if
then
he gets a good idea, there's no let's just double check it. He's like, nope, we're doing it.
Right.
And I get that sometimes you may need a strong voice at the top and a guy to say, you know what, this is not acceptable. This is where we're doing it. I get that sometimes you need that, but he goes way over the top.
Yep, he does. And like I said, I think that the Jets are in a better spot this offseason than they've been in a while. They just need to get the hires right. They have a chance to completely overhaul and reset everything and get it right. I don't know if they will, but the opportunity is there. They're not going about it the wrong way. They're not going half in. They're not, firing the GM, but keeping the head coach. They're not keeping the GM through the draft and then firing him after the draft. They're not forcing a quarterback on a head coach or a GM. It seems like they are actually going to go into the offseason, hire a new regime, a completely new regime, start over and say, here you go. This is your team, especially because it sounds like, again, Woody Johnson is leaving. And Christopher Johnson took a much more hands-off approach and has a track record of taking a more hands-off approach than Woody Johnson. So whatever new regime comes in here, and this also puts to bed a lot of the rumors who would want to come here and stuff, especially when it comes to general managers. Look, there are 32 GM opportunities. GM opportunities come very, very scarcely. You will not find
it's more likely to get a second head coaching job than a second GM job.
By far. There's very few GMs that get second chances, which is if the Jets hired John Dorsey and he got a third chance, that'd be great. But he probably deserves it, and he'd probably be towards the top of my list. But you rarely see GM candidates turning down interviews or turning down job opportunities because there's just so few to go around. It is the crowning achievement for a lot of football executives' careers. They're not going to turn it down regardless of the situation. And I don't think the situation with the Jets is as bad as some people might make it out to be, especially if Christopher Johnson's the owner, because I think Christopher Johnson is a much more GM coach friendly owner than Woody is. You got a completely blank slate with some talented young players on the roster. We were arguing this last week after the Colts loss, Mike, where you were trying to tell me that the Saints job was more appealing. And I was like, that is insane. That is ridiculous. And I firmly believe the Jets job is not as bad as some people might make it out to be, despite all of this nonsense. The biggest thing you have to overcome is almost the narrative surrounding the team, which is that the Jets are coach killers or career killers, QB killers, whatever, that they are just a perpetually dysfunctional organization that is stuck in a cycle of misery.
But it's true, though. It's not like we're making that up.
It's true, but also it's not tangible. Like, that's not a tangible thing that you can point to. Like, if you're a general manager and you are actually evaluating opportunities, you're not going to sit here and say, wow, man, the Jets they're cursed. Like, no, they're not going to think
that.
But
because there are going to be GMs that get multiple offers. I don't know who it's going to be.
Sure.
Like, because the number 2 guy in like a Detroit or Kansas City, we don't know how much they do. Like, with all the information you have about coaches and guys still get it wrong, you have even less about GMs. Like,
sure.
If they get 2 offers, the Jets or another team, that's probably going to weigh heavy on them.
It depends on the team. The curse? You think they're going to go, they're a cursed franchise?
I think they're going to say, why would I be anything different? Because also they're going to say, too, if I come here, now, again, Woody is probably going to leave, but if I come here, am I even going to be allowed to do my job?
Well, that's the thing. I think Christopher Johnson is going to be the owner, and that's a much better, because Christopher Johnson can point and say, look, I had my hands off when I was owner, and there's plenty of people to back that up, and he has a lot of people that like him. Like, Christopher Johnson is well liked within the Jets organization, especially compared to his brother, Woody, who just made the players report this week and practice this week, the week of a bye. They don't have a game on Sunday. The team is 3-8 as reports are going. Everyone's checked out. We don't even need reports. We have eyeballs. We can see that. Woody Johnson still made the players show up and practice this week. Christopher Johnson ain't doing that shit. People like Christopher Johnson. So I think that also plays a factor here. And it's something. I don't think it's that bad of a job. But, Mike, you want to jump into this Woody Johnson stuff?
Well, first, I want to get to Garrett Goodlander's defensive Douglas. He was 30-64, actually, but he inherited the worst team in the NFL. The first 2 years were cleaning up McCagnon's crap. Trumaine Johnson contract, bless Austin. This is a bad move. What about the other 4 years?
Hold on. Immediately, right now, if that was the worst team in the NFL, Garrett, that was the best season that he's ever had. Joe Douglas was 2019. If he inherited the worst team in the NFL, then he somehow made it worse every year for that. How do you defend that? Like, there's a nuanced conversation to be had with Joe Douglas. Like, nobody should be claiming that he's the worst general manager in the history of the sport, but nobody should be claiming that he was a particularly good one either. Even if the process often made sense, there were so many misses, and the record stands for itself. Because if you believe Joe Douglas was genuinely a really good general manager, then you must believe that Robert Saleh is the devil and is the worst coach that has ever existed in the NFL.
Or that Aaron Rodgers is the worst quarterback ever, which I don't think is the case.
Rodgers is the worst quarterback ever. You might argue about Zach Wilson being the worst quarterback ever. Joking, he's not the worst.
Well, who picked him?
One of the worst. Who picked Zach Wilson? Joe Douglas. Who pursued Aaron Rodgers? Joe Douglas. We can argue forever about how much influence Woody Johnson had in those decisions, but what I firmly believe is that Woody Johnson, for the most part, let Joe Douglas run the show for the first 4 years. I mean, first of all, for 2 of those years, Woody wasn't even here. It was Christopher Johnson. Christopher's the one who hired Joe Douglas. That wasn't even Woody. Woody wasn't around for the first couple of years of Douglas's tenure. So if you're saying, he was cleaning up McCagnon's crap for the first couple of years, all right, look at those draft classes from the first couple of years. Terrible. That 2020 class, is there one hit in that entire Ashton Davis?
He might be the best one.
That's the best player in that class for the Jets. I mean,
I got to double check that. Let me see.
Becton's Braden Mann? Like, what are we doing?
The Jets that year, they took Becton round 1.
Yeah,
Denzel Mims, Jabari Zuniga, Ashton Davis, Cameron Clark, James Morgan, LaMichael Pirine, Bryce Hall, Braden Mann.
Bryce Hall might be the best pick in that class. And that's
Bryce
crazy.
Hall played for 4 years as primarily a backup, and now he's in Tampa.
Right. Bryce Hall and Ashton Davis, who are both fringe starting caliber players to backups. That's what I'd put them in that tier. Backup caliber, special teamers, whatever you want to call them. That's the best picks in that class. 2020 wasn't very good either. Michael Carter, the second, being the only really good pick off the top of my head in that class. Jamie and Sherwood as well.
Garrett again. Would he pick Zach because of his uncle? Nah.
And here's the thing, right? Maybe there was some influence from Woody Johnson on the Zach Wilson pick. I'm willing to say that. But at the same time, two things on that. The Athletic just dropped a whatever you want to call it, a bombshell report, an extensive report on how Woody Johnson was intervening in Joe Douglas's job. And Joe Douglas, as they put it, like never had a chance. Obviously, that's just bombastic. That's not necessarily true. That phrasing. Why was there no mention of that then? If the entire premise of the article is to show how Woody Johnson prevented Joe Douglas from doing his job by overstepping, why would they not mention that Woody Johnson forced Joe Douglas to make the worst roster decision that Joe Douglas made during his time with the Jets?
That's the biggest mistake he made was Wilson. And that's
right.
On him.
Yeah, and it's on. And again, we've also defended this because a lot of teams that had Zach Wilson as QB2, he was the consensus QB2. But it doesn't matter. You still made that pick. You still messed up. You missed on the biggest position in the sport when you had the second overall pick. That's bad.
The Jets were second in payroll spending, says Brian, during the 3 years of the Zach Wilson era. Only the Browns spent more, and the Jets had the fourth worst record.
Right. So Woody spent for a while, and then he cut back the last couple of years. If you want to, and you know what actually is really unfortunate about this, Mike, is that the Jets' best window of opportunity for success on Joe Douglas was these last 2 years. Was 2023 and was 2024. Maybe. I mean, now we're seeing what Rodgers looks like. Maybe it wasn't, but definitely 2023 was their window of opportunity for success. That's the offseason that Woody Johnson stepped in and was like, all right, man, I'm going to start doing some stuff here. We're going to overrule. You want a better QB2? Nah, we're actually going to keep Zach Wilson because we're already paying for two of them. We're not going to get a third quarterback. That Woody picked the worst time to cut back on spending. Like, he was spending for a while and he got no results. And then finally, once the team was actually starting to be put together, that's when he cut it back. There's no one person to blame here. It is a conglomeration of fuck ups. And that's why the Jets are in the position that they're in.
Let's go and talk about this Joe Douglas report from The Athletic. Now, you put out a good tweet about it, and I'm going to go and you had about 6 bullet points there, and I think those are the 6 big stories from this big I want to go through them bit by bit and just kind of triage it. The first one is obviously the big headline story, and it's honestly the one thing that I think probably everything else I believe wholeheartedly. This I believe is probably, I don't know about like a straight up lie, but it definitely, as it's reported, I don't think it necessarily happened this way, where he said, I want to bench Aaron Rodgers after the loss to the Broncos, which, by the way, they would have won if Greg Zuerlein made their kicks.
Right.
At that point, Rodgers had 5 touchdowns and 1 interception, and he was 1 game removed from that New England game where he looked like old Aaron Rodgers, and we thought that like the Super Bowl was actually coming.
Where I came on here and said that same old Jets is dead, Mike. That's that game.
And then before Justin ruined everything, so I refuse to believe a guy who has sucked up to Aaron Rodgers at every turn, to everybody's detriment sometimes, even Aaron Rodgers' detriment. We're going to get you everything you want, even if being challenged resulted in 2 MVP seasons from you. We're not going to challenge you. This guy, Hackett, Randall Cobb, whatever. 4 games in, he's going to back out because Greg Zuerlein missed kicks. I don't buy that.
Sure. I think part of this is that the wording has gotten a little bit misconstrued. Obviously, with such a contentious topic, there's going to be a lot of headlines that are like, Woody Johnson wanted to bench Aaron Rodgers, when in reality, there's probably shades of gray to what was said. Now, I'll read exactly.
Every silver lining's got a touch of gray, Justin. Grateful Dead told me that.
There you go. See? And I want to read exactly what the line says here. I don't know. I'm not a deadhead, sorry, but my dad would appreciate that.
Shout out Uncle Jeff.
There you go. I'm going to read the exact snippet from this report from The Athletic, which you should go and check out if you haven't already. It is a very in-depth, interesting read. This is the Jets. I'll kind of summarize some of this, but after that game, after that loss to the Broncos, there was described a contentious meeting at the team facility. Among the people in attendance, Christopher Johnson was there, team president Jaime Elhai, Ira Ecclesrod, who is an advisor to Johnson. To my knowledge, I believe he's Woody's money guy, and he has been for a very long time, since before Joe Douglas.
What do you mean his cap guy, or like
I've always seen him described as his money guy. I don't know if that means it's like his cap guy or what, but that's how I've seen it described. And I know that that is not a Joe Douglas hire. That is specifically a Woody Johnson guy who Woody likes. Jaime Elhai was hired under Joe Douglas, but Ira is a Woody guy. Anyway, it also included some coaches, Robert Saleh, Nathaniel Hackett, Jeff Ulbrich, and Brant Boyer among them. And during the meeting, Johnson suggested to the coaches that they bench Aaron Rodgers in favor of Tyrod Taylor because he felt Rodgers' performance was holding the team back. The coaches and Douglas, stunned at the suggestion, talked him out of it and convinced Johnson to stay the course, and that benching Rodgers with his pedigree 4 games into the season would not sit well at the locker room. Obviously, the coaches also felt to
keep in mind
Rodgers.
Too, at this point they had played 4 games. They were expected to lose to the Niners. They lost. They were expected to beat the Titans and the Patriots. They beat both of them. And then they would have beat the Broncos if Greg Zuerlein makes his kicks. And then they're 3-1. Is he going to still say the same thing?
Right. And now
that's what I don't get. Why would Aaron Rodgers be punished for Greg Zuerlein?
And now here's the part where I think people are overlooking. The idea of benching the future Hall of Famers sounded so absurd that one coach asked whether the owner was serious. Multiple sources from that meeting believed he was. So that part right there. Multiple people in that room. Because look, if you want to try and argue that you're making shit up, go for it. I'm not going to entertain that. Dan Rossini and Zach Rosenblatt are not making this up. Multiple people in that room believed that Woody Johnson was serious. Does that mean Woody Johnson was serious? No. It doesn't mean that he was. It does not mean he was necessarily serious at all. What I think is probably the case, Woody Johnson is an impulsive guy who was very in his feelings and emotional and was pissed that a team that he thought was, I mean, he probably had convinced himself this was maybe the best team in the NFL going into the year. The way he was talking about
he thought they were going to go 18-0.
Right. And so he saw his team lose to a team in the Bronx who they've overachieved this year. Nobody expected them to be this good. Their preseason over-under win total was 5.5. They were expected to be battling for the number 1 pick in the draft. They were not expected to be good. And also, let's not play revisionist history here. Yes, they lost because of a missed field goal, but the team looked like shit. The offense looked like shit. Rodgers did not play well in that game. And so he had seen all of that. He saw his team lose to his team, who he thought was a team leaders, lose to one of the worst teams in the NFL, he believed. And he saw his old quarterback look. He was like emotional about that. And he said, what if we just bench Rodgers? And I think that is probably more how this went. I don't think if the coaching staff and the GM were like, yeah, if you want to bench him, we could. I don't think Woody would have been like, yes, let's do it. I think he would have been like, all right, let's take a step back. Eventually, once cooler heads prevail. That's how
can you own a team for that long and not realize what would happen if you benched any quarterback, let alone Aaron Rodgers?
Right. And that was a serious suggestion. That's, again, multiple.
Well, then why would you say that? That's that's not a thing to joke about, is it?
Because it's an impulsive thought from an 80-year-old billionaire. What do you mean?
But he's also the owner, so you have to take everything he says seriously.
And he's bad at his job. He's a bad owner. He's a bad owner who makes impulsive decisions, has impulsive thoughts. I'm not defending.
All right, so imagine if he said, let's bench Rodgers, and they said, okay, you're the owner, and the next day he goes, LOL, I was kidding.
I think in that meeting, he would have been like, whoa, they actually took me seriously. Let me take it back and let's not do this. That's my read on it. But again, neither of us were in that room, Mike. But that's not like that part of this whole report is not the biggest, thing that I'm kind of, I don't know. It's not the biggest part of the report to me. As Brian said, he's older, crankier, and more desperate now than he's ever been. Yes. This was the year for him. Like for as much, because Woody Johnson is a Jets fan, right? He is an owner.
And not to get morbid, he is 77. Like he is running out of time to, fix it.
No, you're absolutely correct. And he thought, as he said week after this was the most talented roster that they'd ever put together. And he was convinced this was the year. Just like a lot of Jets fans had talked themselves into that too. He was acting like a fan. He was being impulsive. And Mike, you're going to tell me this, right? You're going to say, oh, how many times, oh, he shouldn't have said that Rodgers was a joke. You said that to me multiple times during games we were watching together this year. You messaged me and said, bench Rodgers.
Here's the difference, Justin. Am I the owner of the New York Jets?
No, but you have to understand that Woody Johnson doesn't behave like an owner. He pretends he acts like a fan.
Well, he behaves like an owner when he can insert his will over things, wouldn't that be a way to insert your will over something?
He look, and this is not like, I don't know Johnson personally, but he behaves like a 12-year-old fan watching the game. And unfortunately, that's the man who's making a lot of the big decisions for the Jets. That's just how it is. I'm not defending Woody Johnson here. I'm just trying to give what I think is an accurate interpretation of what happened. But again, we're not in the room. We don't know for certain exactly what happened. But I will say I would be surprised if Woody Johnson earnestly thought it was time to bench to bench Aaron Rodgers after 4 games. I will say that. But I'm not shocked at all that he threw out the suggestion.
The other thing, too, is that this is where the Douglas defenders can actually have a leg to stand on here, because there were 2 reports that Joe Douglas had certain big moves made, not like little things, where he wanted to do it and then Woody put the kibosh on it. Firstly, extending Bryce Huff at pretty much a similar price as to what he got with the Eagles.
Well, we don't know that. We don't know that part. We don't know the price.
Didn't it say close to?
No. So so here's the thing with that report, right? With the Bryce Huff thing, I don't want Joe Douglas to be made a martyr by this report. Like, I know that was clearly the slant of the article with the report was to make it seem like Joe Douglas never had a chance. I'm pretty sure that was like the title of it. What we know about the Bryce Huff thing and what was said in that article was that Bryce Huff, an extension prepared for Bryce Huff, did not say the dollar terms. They say the figures at all. And what has been reported in the past was that the Jets did not believe that Bryce Huff was worth what he ended up getting paid, and that they were not prepared to offer him a contract anywhere near what the Eagles paid him. So while I do believe it's probably true that Woody Johnson nixed any potential extension offer to Bryce Huff, I don't think this is a situation where Joe Douglas should get a free pass here. I don't think Joe Douglas wanted to extend Bryce Huff at the price tag anyway. And you could also make the argument, of course, now, seeing how Huff has struggled in Philly, that maybe that was the right decision. But that's another argument.
And then the other thing, too, was he was trying to trade Jerry Jeudy.
Oh, this one. Yeah.
Trade for Jerry Jeudy and Alan Lazard.
It was Lazard and a day 2 pick. What was it? A 2 pick.
A day 2 pick, excuse me. Alan Lazard and a day 2 pick would have gone to the Broncos. Jerry Jeudy would have gone to the Jets. Of course, Jeudy ended up going to the Browns later, and jokingly was like, "Oh, thank God that didn't happen. You're on a worse team, but okay. Glad you're happy there, Jerry Jeudy. How's your sexual assault quarterback going there, Jerry Jeudy?"
Which way? Which one?
Oh, yeah, which one? Yeah, of course. I forgot. I got to differentiate them. But I'm glad you're fine there, Jerry Jeudy. And Elijah Moore, by the way, too. So,
well,
the thing about this, though, is honestly, that might have been a good call considering how Lazard has played this year and that it's a day 2 pick. Like, I get that. But honestly, even if that may have been a good call, I still don't like it. Because Woody Johnson does not know how good Jerry Jeudy is. And he does not know how good Alan Lazard is, even though he's on his own team. Because he's an heir to a pharmaceutical fortune who's never worked a day in his life. Joe Douglas was a scout and director of player personnel for the Eagles. Like, you gotta delegate. You gotta let them do your thing. I know you think you have all the answers. And you know what? I'm sure you could find takes that we've had, like players they should have drafted, trades they should have made, that would have been better than players the Jets should have drafted or trades they made. We're also not GMs, and we don't claim to be. Like, the fact this is even a thing, even if the move worked out, I don't like it.
Well, we're not GMs, but apparently we have some influence on the decisions that they make,
yeah.
as we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, no, this was one of the ones where I was reading this report, and because I read it, in its entirety as soon as it dropped, and that was one of the first moments where I was like, okay, you made the right call here, Woody. Like, I don't like that you did this, but the Jets trading Alan Lazard and a day 2 pick, which when I hear day 2 pick, probably would have been a 3rd round pick. So that would have lit another 3rd round pick on fire.
That might have been the Adams pick.
That probably would have been the Adams pick, so they wouldn't have got Adams. Hey ho, who cares? I guess maybe they'd be better off with Jeudy than Adams, sort of. But you also, the other part of that is you had to pay Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy now got a contract that's, I believe, worth $19-20 million a year. Jerry Jeudy is not worth that money. Especially you're giving up Lazard and like a day 2 pick. That would have been a bad trade for the Jets. I'm happy that did not happen, and that's one of the few spots of this report where I'm like, yeah, well, Joe Douglas does not come out of this looking like a genius. I don't know what the intent of the article was. I mean, I think the intent was to make Woody Johnson look like he was overbearing and overstepping and making Joe Douglas job harder. Yes, that is what that is. I think that came across very well. But I don't think necessarily the slant of it was to make Joe Douglas look like he was a genius and was perfect, because this, and then we can talk about the Reddick thing. I don't know if that was
the Reddick thing where they basically said that Hassan Reddick, even during all these trade machinations, told the Jets, "I'm not coming unless I get a new deal."
Yeah.
Joe Douglas did it anyway. And he just assumed that Reddick would show. Now that puts a whole different spin on all these conversations we had before, where we probably just assumed, because how could we not, that there was some sort of agreement that Reddick would either report and play without a deal, or the Jets would give him a deal without him showing up. Now it looks worse. Now Reddick actually has more of a leg to stand on. If it's been known for that long that Joe Douglas kind of screwed himself like that.
Right. So there's still conflicting information about this because we have still seen reports from, I would say, from the Jets. It's from Connor Hughes, but look, no disrespect to Connor. He's acting in the mouthpiece for the organization. That report came from Connor where he was like, yes, the Jets were under the impression, and they were made to be under the impression that Reddick would report regardless, and that Reddick reportedly told multiple people in the building that he would show up. That's what Connor's reporting. That's what the Jets side of it is. Clearly, this part of it, I don't think this from the Jets. A lot of this in the article, this is where, media literacy, reading comprehension comes into play and why so many people struggle with this. This part says according to a league source. A lot of this article says according to team sources, to Jets sources. This specifically says according to a league source. So this did not come from the Jets. This came from someone in the NFL, whether it's a representation of Hassan Reddick, another team, whatever. This came from the league source. It says that Douglas was warned by Reddick's representation that if the Jets didn't plan on awarding Reddick a new contract, they should hold off on a trade. But when Douglas found out it only cost him a 2026 third-round pick for a player of Reddick's caliber, he did it anyway, believing that Reddick would report and the team could figure out the contract later. That does not make Joe Douglas look very good. And so that's why a lot of people saying...
Which I get, that honestly makes it true because it makes it look less like a puff piece if you include that in there.
Now, I think the part of it where they're trying to make Douglas better is that it says, however, per team sources, so again, now we're going back from the Jets side of things, Johnson wasn't willing to give Reddick a new contract. And so Reddick skipped OTAs, minicamp, blah, whatever. He missed the season, whatever. He came back eventually. So that part's making it sound like, oh, well, Joe Douglas wanted to give him this contract and Woody didn't allow him to. First of all, I hope Joe Douglas didn't want to give him that contract because he'd be an idiot if he did. That would be a very bad decision to pay Hassan Reddick, which we said for months on end going into the summer, into training camp and into season. But yeah, I don't think any of that section makes Joe Douglas look particularly good. That and the Jerry Jeudy, I'm like, all right, buddy. Like, clearly there was some mistakes that you were going to make or you wanted to make that Woody Johnson actually overstepped and prevented you from that turned out to be for the best. Brian, as he says, I never believed that part of Hassan giving him his word. He spoke to them before Hop Media introduction over Zoom and probably just said, yeah, to questions of him reporting. Yeah, I think that is more likely true.
Justin, is like legal ironclad agreement.
Of course.
It's like a blood oath.
It's written in stone. Yeah, I think it's more so that the Jets have exaggerated the degree of confirmation that they got from Hassan Reddick's camp that he would report. It does not sound like, to me, my read on the situation is it doesn't seem like there was any sort of official confirmation. And if you don't have that official confirmation, Joe, I don't care if it's only a 2026 third-round pick. If you don't have confirmation that this player is going to play for your football team, you don't make that trade.
So the more concerning part, I'm gonna tie these two together too. Just to truncate him. He really advocated for, and we know that he does this because last year when everything went sideways, there were all reports about, hey, you should bench Zach Wilson, you should bench this guy. He was badgering Robert Saleh with it because we saw it on social media. This is what the fans want, give it to him. And we always complain about owners not thinking about the fans and being up in this ivory tower and not caring and just looking at this as an investment. Woody needs to listen to fans less. You always hear that old statement, you can't coach based on what the fans say, otherwise you'll end up sitting with them.
Yeah.
Like Woody, and now the problem is Woody can't be removed from ownership unless he does something like Donald Sterling or something illegal. So he can do that however much he wants. And there were
we got to Dan Snyder him somehow. We got to Dan Snyder him somehow. So there's definitely so much dirt on him.
Well, Dan Snyder didn't even. I don't even think that was illegal. I think just everybody else hated him.
Well, he wasn't even like for all the
like the owners didn't like him. I feel like the other owners, because they're all are most owners in the league are Woody Johnson.
Yes.
Not to this level of bad, but like personality wise, most owners are that.
Yes.
So they probably like him. And there were two instances. Well, number one, he said he really pushed for the signing of both Tyron Smith and Mike Williams based on social media. Now, both of them didn't work out. Mike Williams has already been traded. They never went vertical, and his whole thing is being a vertical guy. Tyron Smith, an all-pro last year, second-team all-pro, looking his age. I'm honestly going to give him a pass for that just because a lot of people, not just fans, A lot of people were saying all-in year, Tyron Smith, improvement at left tackle, Mike Williams, big improvement at wide receiver. This isn't just like fans demanding, get the best players. This isn't that. These are guys that at the time made sense for additions. I think we both liked it when they signed them.
Absolutely.
And I think that Joe Douglas obviously had an interest in both of them. And then Robert Saleh was like, Woody Johnson was like really pushing him over the top. I don't think that's super egregious for an owner to want, players like that on their team, or for an owner to want Aaron Rodgers on their team. I don't think that that's the most egregious thing. Right. Oddly enough, as Garrett said, didn't Woody say something inappropriate? Yeah, when he was an ambassador in 2020, and then he's
said a lot and done a lot of inappropriate things.
Yeah, it was about Black History Month, is what he said.
Oh, and, wonderful.
But a diplomatic immunity, he can do whatever he wants. It's a shitty system. But the problem is when he was the one who advocated for Tony Adams. And this was, from my opinion, the biggest issue in this entire article. You're thinking, how? It's just Tony Adams. That's the problem. It's like when Michael Carter got cut last year, and you're like, why Michael? Like, he wasn't playing well, but like, of all the people, why are you going to cut Michael Carter? Because it's one thing for him to have opinions on Aaron Rodgers. It's one thing for him to have opinions on Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wood. These are marquee players that are going to make or break wins. Or it's one thing to have an opinion on Robert Saleh, the coach, because this is the coach of your football team. I know for a fact, guarantee, ironclad, lock it in. Woody Johnson is not watching all 22 film and saying that Tony Adams is tackling poorly. No. What I think happened, and this is why I'm concerned, is he saw like a couple all 22 posts on Twitter and a couple very loud, voices, be it in like the sports radio area or the social media or wherever, say, man, Tony Adams is terrible. And then he made that an owner directive to bench a guy. That's the concerning part, because that shows you just how easily influenced it is. It's one thing to ask for good players, especially if they're logical fits, to demand a safety be benched when I know for a fact Woody Johnson does not know how well Tony Adams is playing in Jeff Ulbricht's scheme, other than what he sees based on a couple clips he sees on the internet, or maybe one of his buddies told him that, like, hey, man, Tony Adams sucked yesterday. The fact that he could go and make that leap to make it a directive from the owner to bench this guy, coach, GM, nope, sorry, your opinion doesn't matter. Coach, your opinion doesn't matter. Bench this safety. A young player who's a developmental success story. Now the owner just benched him. I wonder what he's thinking right now. That's the biggest problem I have with this.
And rightfully so. And this is not new information. I at least it shouldn't be. I'm pretty sure in that last athletic report that came
out, the Rodgers thing makes more sense, honestly.
Sure. But
because it's one thing to have an opinion on the quarterback.
Yeah.
To have an opinion on Tony Adams as an owner.
I agree.
I don't believe that he's grinding all 22 film and came to that decision.
No, of course. Man's never watched all 22 film in his life. He's probably walked in on like Joe Douglas watching all 22 film and like, oh, what's this? Like, he doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But
this is how you watch football? Oh my God.
Right.
There's no broadcast angle. Who's doing the game?
Exactly. He's like, how do you go? There's more than one camera at the game? What is going on with this? But no, it's like, this is nothing new. This was, I believe, put in the Athletic report from earlier in the year, back in like January. And this also, other people have said this. Woody Johnson regularly scrolls Twitter. Like, this is not a joke. This isn't us being like, I don't know. It's not as being silly.
We don't have like Woody a heightened sense of who we are influence-wise.
No, of course not. But I'm telling you right now, because I legitimately laughed out loud when I was reading this article, and I saw the part where it said, specifically Tyron Smith and Mike Williams. It mentioned those two players by name that Woody Johnson pushed to sign both of those players because of social media pressure. Thought back, because I was like, man, I was very vocal about wanting to sign those two players. And I found a tweet of mine that said specifically the phrase, I will do diabolical things if the Jets sign Tyron Smith and Mike Williams. And it is hilarious. And this is not meant to be like an inflated sense of ego. I really think, Mike, there's a real possibility that Woody Johnson scrolled Twitter and saw that tweet amongst many other tweets begging for the Jets to sign those players. And he said, hey, Joe, look at this. Sign these guys. That is so fucking funny. And if you told 12-year-old me that even the possibility that something I said would have even a 0.5% or like 0.0001% chance of impacting a decision that the Jets made. 12 geeking. 12-year-old me to be so excited. 26 he's pissed. Don't listen to me.
We've won, but at what cost?
Right? I'm an idiot. I thought Carl Lawson would be good. Don't listen to me. I'm an idiot. All right?
I thought Dalvin Cook would be good.
We're dumb, Woody. If you are lurking in chat right now, stop listening to us. I say that now, and then like a year
Brian
from now,
Sternbeck, if that is your real name and not Woody
right.
Johnson.
Right. AJ, is that really you? I think it's WJ, Woody Johnson. But no, like it's so dumb, and it makes me. It was really funny because I was like, I'm like, is this referring to me? Is this referring to NYJ Matt? Is this referring to Drew from Jersey? Whoever else on Twitter? Like, because that was. Jets Twitter really wanted to sign Mike Williams. Jets Twitter really wanted to sign Tyron Smith. The internet really wanted to sign those guys. And the fact that Woody Johnson saw those tweets, saw those posts, and was like, hey, you got to sign these guys. Oh, we caught Brian. I mean, Woody. Woody, that's you. It's Robert, actually. Robert Woody Johnson.
Woody, have the nurse stop entering tweets in, because I know you're not doing it. Have your at-home living nurse stop doing that, because you're an old man.
You realize paradox though, Mike, because we're telling Woody not to listen to us, but if he listens to us, like if he's not listening to us, then he can't take that advice. So we're stuck.
Here's the weird thing about Woody.
Paradox.
Here's the weird thing. I actually would prefer my owner to be a little bit hands-on. Like there's a right amount of hands-on you need to be. Like if
on
you
the scale
listen,
of
like,
Jerry
listen
Jones
listen to how Pirates fans talk about Bob Nutting, where he's so hands-off and all money. And they would just want to wring the guy's neck. Even in the NFL, go listen to like Seahawks fans, because remember Paul Allen used to own them, and then he died.
Yeah.
Jody Allen, his sister, is now the owner. She has not given an interview in years, and people are pissed. So because of that, I want my owner to. I don't have a problem with an owner taking some control and saying, I want to ensure that I have a quality product. And I don't mind bringing in outside voices to help. The problem is, on matters where he should listen to outside voices, he goes rogue and does everything himself.
Mm-hmm.
And on issues where it's fine to have one singular, this is how we should do things voice, he lets. You ever hear that old phrase, a camel is a horse by committee?
No, but that's a good phrase. I like that.
It basically what you said is basically if you asked 10 people how to draw a horse, it would end up everybody would try to get their thing in and it wouldn't look perfectly. So a single vision can be better than 10 other people. On issues where he should take charge, he asks like 10 other people and social media member. He's crowdsourcing the Jet Press Twitter and NYJ Matt and Jake Asman and all these guys for his opinion. We're giving opinions. We're not making these organizational directives. And you know what? We shouldn't. Even if we have a high success rate, we're still just analysts. For crying out loud.
Right.
This is our job is not to make roster decisions. This should not be in your mind at all. It's important to listen to fans to get the temperature on things.
Sure.
To see if they are like if the fan base has it out for somebody. I don't have a problem with Woody being like, all right, the fans are getting restless. I can't keep this guy in there. I get that. Even with the Saleh thing, I don't like that a lot, but I get and understand it because you need to hear your fans. But you can't let the fans just be the GM. Nobody does that.
Mike, it turns out we had actually both Jets owners in the chat. AJ has revealed himself as Christopher Johnson, and they're going to go and make some burner accounts and rejoin. So
AJ also said the living in DFW, the meddling, controlling owner is not something I'm unfamiliar with. Jerry, to his credit,
the other end of that spectrum.
Jerry has been a very good drafter, and he's got Will McClay, who he delegates a lot of stuff to.
Yeah.
Woody does not have either of those things. And Jerry has won Super Bowls in the past. Woody does not. So oddly enough, Jerry Jones's way of managing is probably better than Woody Johnson's way of managing.
Woody has that IRA guy, that money guy. That's his advisor. It's IRA.
Yeah, the money guy. I don't even know what he does. Is he supplying Woody with money? Is he investing his money? What is he doing?
I don't know. I've literally only seen him described as Woody's money guy. That's what I've seen. I don't know, man. But yeah, I the Tony Adams stuff is also very funny because, like you said, of all players, why Tony Adams? I genuinely feel bad for him because, like, I don't think he was playing that poorly. I think he was fine. Like,
he wasn't playing great, but like he's not the reason the defense sucks.
I mean, look, it would put all the stock in PFF grades accolades here, but he was graded as PFF's 25th safety this year out of 89 qualifiers. Like that's not bad. He's only allowed 11 catches, been credited with 11 catches. The missed tackles were a bit of an issue, but the missed tackles are an issue for their defense. I don't see why
he's in that range where he's good enough where benching him bad enough where you could bench him and it sends a message, but also not good enough. You can't bench Sauce or Quentin Williams. So it had to be somebody in that Goldilocks zone.
Sure, but at the same time, bench Jalen Mills. Like, bench somebody who's not going to be here next year. Tony Adams is the only safety in that entire room who has a chance on the roster next year. Like, I don't understand. I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to find sense in Woody Johnson, the same guy who seemingly suggested, maybe jokingly, to bench Aaron Rodgers after 4 games. But it is very funny where it's like, why of all players, Tony Adams, so Brian mentioned before, why not Michael Clemens? Like, if Woody really listens to Twitter, I don't think Twitter's been that hard on Tony Adams. Not nearly as much as guys like Clemens or Javon Kinlaw, who I think had a really good game this past week, but has been bad most of the year. Those are the guys you're going to bench. If you're going to bench anybody, bench Michael Clemens. Why are we benching Tony Adams, the poor guy?
But look, like, this is the kind of stuff where you wonder, like, are you ever going to – because you can't make guys sell. That's why I don't normally complain about Woody as much as everybody else does. Because number one, people go sell the team. As Carolina has shown, you could get Cleveland has shown, you can get bought by worse people.
Yep.
So that's not always going to fix everything.
At least
you could be the Browns or the Panthers. And number two, you can't force people to sell. Like, the fans can't just revolt and make Woody Johnson sell the team. He can hold on to that until his last gasp of air, and then he goes off to wherever the hell you go when you die. He can hold on to that team, and nothing could ever change his mind on that. He might sell every last thing he has before he sells the Jets. That's why I don't want to complain about it. But this is also ridiculous. And you have to, because you got to say this is not normal.
No, it's not. There's no solution. It wouldn't make for good podcasting if we got on here for an hour and just said Woody Johnson sucks, sell the team. Like, there's no analysis there. There's no solution, and they're not going to fix anything. But I look, Mike, I'm just a little happy. Like, yesterday was a very enjoyable day, and we didn't even get to talk about it. We're not going to talk about it. But the Manish Mehta situation was also wild. That also added.
I can't.
That also added
the
to the
one time. I'm not even mentioning him by name on this show. I can't.
That also added to the sheer absurdity of this, and I didn't put this on
That's
Twitter.
Not even like a ha funny thing. That's like concerning and scary.
Oh no, the man's deranged. Like he's deranged. I feel very comfortable saying that here. He is. I'll say this. I didn't put this on Twitter. I just told you just right before we went on live. We went live. He DM'd me. He DM'd the Jet Press account, and he DM'd my personal account, telling me to take this shit down, and it was lies and it was fake. No, it's not, buddy. I saw it, but we don't got to get into all that. But all of that combined, I felt something about the Jets yesterday. I felt feelings for this football team that I haven't felt in a long time. Now, those feelings were humiliation and anger and despair, but they were feelings. I didn't feel apathy. And that's all I asked for, because the rest of the season, it's going to be pretty apathetic. I don't know what we're going to talk about over the remainder of the year. I don't know how we're going to analyze these games. It's similar to last year, where it was just nothing matters. But at least last year, we're like rooting for draft position, and we're rooting for them to lose. And was it entertaining maybe at times watching Trevor Siemian try to play quarterback? Maybe a little bit, I guess. It was funny.
Tim Boyle, who signed again, by the way, 17
Tim Boyle,
now.
who is now, he not only did he sign with the Giants, he's immediately been promoted to third string because they're just saying, screw it with Daniel Jones. He's never going to play again. He might get released. I would be shocked if Daniel Jones was released before the season even ends, because what's the point of this? You have no reason to keep him on the roster. I'd not be shocked. In fact, I would expect Tim Boyle to play at some point, the Giants. But I don't know. I don't know what we're going to talk about. But I do know next week, barring any changes, maybe we should change the name of the award show now in light of this report. But as of right now, still called the Woodies. The Chris's doesn't have a good.
No, Chuck is for Charles, so never mind.
What about no? I got it. Just call it the Johnsons.
What are you trying to get? That's a TOS violation. I can't do that.
Change it from the Wood, but I the Woodies.
Justin's 8 years old, so
the Woodies, GGSM. Look, it adds a little bit of levity to the show. But
levity, but like we gotta be professional show here, man.
It fits it. You got the Emmys, you got the Grammys, and you got the Woodies, which is our annual
same thing.
Our annual biannual Manish lies, but he never did anything. Don't look up what he did with Joe Douglas's kid at the Phillies game. Don't look up that thing because that sounds a lot worse than it was. But okay. Never mind.
Oh my God. Okay, we're off the rails. We're as off the rails as the Jets. So
anyway, next week
the
we will be back.
Points are the Jets are a mess. So
right.
In other words, no different from the last 14 years with no playoffs. Before we go, I want to get to a question from AJ. Is there some bridge quarterback out there, assuming Tyrod doesn't start and Aaron Rodgers doesn't start? Tyrod is probably the bridge quarterback. He's done it before with Baker Mayfield and Justin Herbert. Like, he's a good guy to do it. Not going to throw a lot of interceptions. Reliable guy. Been in a ton of different schemes. Can pick up a playbook quickly. He's the guy you want. A bridge quarterback.
Your options are pretty limited, and Tyrod is already under contract next year, so it makes sense. But if you did want to look at other options, Russell Wilson's going to be a free agent. At this rate, he's playing well. I think
Steelers keep him.
That's what I'm saying. He's playing well. Pittsburgh probably keeps him. He's going to be a free agent. Jameis Winston, Jacoby Brissett, Daniel Jones, maybe Derek Carr.
Justin Fields, if you want to roll it on a younger guy again.
Justin Fields, maybe. Derek Carr, maybe. I don't know. Those are realistically your options. I don't think I'm missing it. Oh, and Sam Darnold, obviously.
Carr, I wouldn't mind. I think he's like second in the league in net yards per attempt.
Carr would be a fine 1-2 year contract. I'd be okay with that. A 1-2 year contract for Derek Carr. I'd be fine with that.
Probably Darnold, keep Adams though too if you keep Carr.
That is true, actually. That's actually.
And then you get Carr, Adams, Wilson.
I've not thought about that.
That's not awful for a new head coach.
I have not thought about that. If the Saints do Derek Carr go, which they very well might, Devontae keeping Adams makes actually a ton of sense. That would be really funny. A weird way of keeping Devontae Adams. But yeah, as Garrett said in chat as well, Darnold is another possible option. I don't think that's going to happen. That would be absurd, quite frankly.
Poor Brian just found out he's not allowed to change his screen name more than twice in 14 days, so he's Manish Mehta's burner for the next 3 episodes.
No. Brian, no.
Oh, no.
Well, no, it's good because we're not going to have a show on Sunday because the Jets don't play. So it's one
that happened with a friend of mine on Facebook where he changed it to something like inappropriate that you can't say on stream. And then Facebook, after you change it like 3 times, doesn't let you change it anymore. So he had to delete his profile because it was stuck as that name.
Oh, my. So it could be worse, Brian. You could have made your name something awful. I mean, Manish Mehta's burner is pretty bad, but I will be referring to him as Manish Mehta's burner for the next 3 weeks as punishment. Sorry, buddy. But yeah, your options are not particularly good at quarterback. Andy Dalton. Bring back Joe Flacco. I don't know, man. It's not good. Tyrod makes the most sense, considering he's already under contract next year. So if you were to bring in someone else, you have to cut
even
Tyrod.
If he wasn't, I'd recommend bringing him in.
Yeah, but you'd have to cut him, eat that dead money, and then sign a new quarterback. I don't think Woody is going to want to do that. So that makes sense. But Derek Carr would be the only one that you could actually possibly like move me and make me be like, okay, this is a better bridge option. But does it really matter? The Jets aren't making the playoffs next year, most likely anyway. So who cares, man?
With that, we'll sign off on the Jet Press podcast. A wild and wacky last 24 hours. Joe Douglas is no more. Robert Saleh is no more. Aaron Rodgers will be no more in a couple months. It's bad, man. Any final thoughts here, Justin, to sign us off?
Maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, Mike. Maybe this is the. I'm just in a good mood.
Maybe there's a chance, is what you're saying.
Look, I'm just in a good mood because yesterday was hilarious. But maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe this is the offseason that they finally get everything right because they have that chance. They're going to have the opportunity. They're going to be able to bring in a new coach, GM, and quarterback. Maybe this is when it finally happens. But until then, first of all, like I said before, join us next week because this was supposed to be the week that we did the Woodies, our annual or semi-annual, biannual, whatever you want to call it, award show where we're giving out awards to this stupid NFL organization.
Biennial. No, biennial is is that twice a year or once every 2 years?
I think biannual is twice a year.
So biennial is once every 2 years. Okay.
Sure. We do it multiple times. We do it multiple times because we do it at the end of the year as well. But we'll be doing some awards next week. It was supposed to be this week, and the Jets decided to drop all of their. I do appreciate, by the way, the Jets used to have their news dump day be Wednesday, and it happened a lot of the times when we were streaming. Now it's
after. Tuesday. I know after, like Mike LaFleur.
Or sometimes after. Now it's Tuesday. Now they do everything on Tuesday, which is great because we can get our ducks in order and get ready to stream on Wednesday. But next week we'll do the award show, so make sure to check in for that. Oh, one of my favorite streams. We're gonna have 2 back-to-back streams. I'm very excited for. But until then, thank you all for joining us on the show today. You can follow Mike on Twitter at @ByMikeLuciano. Follow me on Twitter, Justin T. Freed. Follow the Jet Press at the Jet Press. Download the Jet Press podcast wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, like, hit that notification bell. And as Mike mentioned at the top of the show, you can subscribe and become a member. It is 99 cents. If you want to donate to my fund of improving my internet that will hopefully be fixed in the near future because it sucks. Thanks a lot, Optimum. You can give us 99 cents and you get priority chat. And it's a great way to help support the show. We really appreciate everybody who always tunes in. Thank you all for listening to the Jet Press podcast. Of course, we stream live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time and live immediately following every single Jets game. We won't be live this Sunday because the Jets don't play. So to everybody, enjoy your football Sunday. Enjoy your weekend without having to watch this NFL team because it's a brutal watch. But yeah, thank you all for listening to Jet Press podcast. I've been Justin Freed. That's been Michael Luciano. We will see you guys next Wednesday.
Thanks for watching, Woody.